2004, almost exactly 1 year before he would become Pope Benedict XVI, at the death of John Paul II, Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger said this. He said, "Many people perceive Christianity as something institutional rather than as an encounter with Christ," which explains why they don't see it as a source of joy. He continues, "Today, Christianity is seen as an old tradition, weighed down by old commandments, something we already know which tells us really nothing new. A strong institution, one of the great institutions that weigh upon our shoulders." He goes on by saying, though, perhaps this is true in a sense, it actually does not get near the truth at all and runs the risk of missing the essence of Christianity altogether. That if we stay in this sort of institutional, forbearing mindset of this council, and that council happened, that pope became pope, and then there was this pope, there's this apparition, these promulgations, that we could run the risk of missing him who is here now right in front of us. Jesus says in Scripture, this is Matthew chapter 13, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a person took and sowed in a field." So yes, the church is absolutely grand. She is historically marvelous, holy, and divinely instituted. Yet at the exact same time, Jesus tells us himself that she is the smallest and most fragile of all seeds. You could say she is ever ancient, and she is ever new. And it is this newness that we are called into. What Christianity is at its essence is a personal encounter with God, to allow him to touch our heart and we to touch his. So we read from the Gospel of John today, the wedding at Cana. Jesus, his dearest friends, his mother, are all most welcome guests. We know how the story goes, right? The wine runs dry. And I kind of like to think that this bride, who's of course planning the entire wedding, she wanted to give the groom just one job, and one job only, right? Just please promise me, make sure the wine does not run out, right? You even see later in the story that the head waiter, when he sees this new wine, he goes to the bridegroom, perhaps testament to it was the groom's responsibility. And we all know what happens. Jesus performs his first miracle, turning water into wine. But not just an average wine, not even just an average amount of wine. Right? It's 6 jars, each holding 20 to 30 gallons of the best wine that has ever been upon this earth. A wine which you could say tastes of and comes from the finest of all grapes, which have grown in the most perfect soil, on a private land, bought at a price, tilled for hundreds of years, born from a vine which is pruned and harvested yearly by careful and absolutely cared for laborers, mixed and fermented by an expert. We could say so much an expert that he's divine in nature, this vintner. And then he ages and stores it perfectly for a good amount of time, waiting for this exact moment in time, this wedding feast. So all that is true, right? But at the same time, we could say the wine is not old at all, that it's brand new, as if it were a small mustard seed on the cusp of its own germination, right? That it was just created miraculously by Jesus, that it is ever ancient and ever new. And yet this newness would certainly not be without the ancient, without that which came before. And in the same way, the ancient would remain ancient were the new not to call it into newness, into the present, into being. Were not his beloved mother Mary to see a need, to go encounter her son, perhaps in a vulnerable and challenging way, and to ask of him. And it was an encounter with Jesus that brought about this miracle, a miracle which foreshadows and typifies the exact thing we do in the Catholic Mass, which we're about to do today upon this altar. That in a very similar way, we are invited into that vulnerable space to encounter Christ, to ask of him from our need, and then to watch him turn bread and wine into something much greater. I'll leave you with another quote from Pope Benedict. He said, "Being Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea, but the encounter with an event, a person, which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. To keep the gaze of our life, of our heart, always fixed on Him. To understand that Christianity is not an intellectual system, a collection of dogmas or moralism. Christianity is instead an encounter. It is a love story. It is an event.